Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 8th episode of Anime Sub. I am Tyler, as always, and today we've got a very special episode because we're going to be partially talking about a show, and we're also going to be talking about a topic that I find interesting and kind of a topic that was brought on by today's show. So I want to talk to you about Cat's Eye. Now, if you haven't seen Cat's Eye, I'm not talking about the 1980s one, by the way, which I think a lot more people are going to be familiar with. There's actually a new Disney-produced Cat's Eye that has come out, and it was a ONA, so that's, straight to streaming. No TV debut for this one. It probably went straight to Disney Plus, if I had to guess. Yeah, this is a remake of a 1980s anime of the same name with over 170 episodes, I believe. And I've never seen that show. I've never seen the 1980s anime. I've not read the manga. I know nothing about it. This is my first introduction to the material. And I'm sure all of the Cat's Eye fans of the original out there are rolling their eyes into the back of their heads right now and probably having an aneurysm at the fact that I have not seen the original. And that this new series is my actual introduction to the series, which is a shame. It's a real shame because I was kind of open-minded. I saw the design of the girls on the cover art, and I thought, this looks like it could be a cute kind of show. I had no idea what it was about from the cover art. I had no idea what kind of show I was in for, so I jumped into episode 1, and admittedly, I was not thoroughly impressed with episode 1, but I wanted to see it through. I wanted to give it a chance. I kind of digged how ridiculous the show kind of felt and how it kind of leaned into its silliness, and eventually that didn't save it anymore, but I enjoyed the silliness for the time being, so I said I'm going to keep up with this, and it was being released weekly at that point. Terrible idea, by the way, for the just this kind of show. This should have been an all-at-once drop. I'm going to be completely honest. I think that this should have been an all-at-once drop. I know that you might not get the metrics that you want from that kind of thing, but I don't think that this is getting big metrics anyway, so I gotta be honest. I haven't heard anyone else talk about this show. I feel like I've entered my own realm. When I'm reading the comments on this show, it doesn't even seem like people really seem to like it all that much. I don't know. I don't think that this should have been a weekly drop show. Whatever. Let's get into what the show's about. If you're not familiar with Cat's Eye from the 1980s anime, this show is about a group, I guess you could call them a thief group, a group of thieves, a group of burglars. Hitomi, I, and whatever the third sister's name is. We'll get into why I don't remember the third sister's name here shortly, but Hitomi and I are two of the sisters, and then there's a third older one that's also in there. There's a detective who is fawning after Hitomi, who ends up kind of being our main character here. But their goal as a thief unit, which we don't find this out until episode 2, by the way. That was another thing I found kind of strange about the pilot. I didn't have any motivation for why they were stealing these paintings. There was kind of foreshadowing, but they didn't really explain it until the second episode, so that felt kind of weird. And their explanation is that the syndicate, the Kurnaf syndicate, as they refer to it as throughout the show, has stolen their father's paintings, and they also believe that their father is still alive and making new paintings, and they're stealing these paintings to hopefully be able to trace their way to their father. I'm not really sure how that's going to end up working, but it's a mystery that they don't solve in this season. So, and the show kind of revolves around them stealing these paintings. Obviously, the detective starts off as a kind of foil to them, but he's honestly one of the more charming parts of the show. He's in love with Hitomi, who is not the leader of Cat's Eye, but she is the main character of this show. And let's get into why that's a problem. When you have 3 characters who are a part of your lead group, right? Unless this was Cat's Eye Hitomi, we should also give some focus and some episodes to the other girls. And throughout the season, I don't really feel like we do that. I don't feel like I gets an episode. I don't feel like the third older sister gets her time to shine, to the point that I don't even remember her name, which is a real problem. Let me look at it real quick just so I can say it here and there, as needed. Rui. I think Rui, yes, Rui is the other sister. Rui, and Hitomi. Okay, so Rui's the third sister, and I feel like she never gets any time to shine, neither does I. They briefly show that I is like a gadget, tinkerer, inventor, tech whiz kind of person at one point, but then that never comes up again. It never goes anywhere. I don't feel like we ever get any mileage out of her being a tinkerer or see her doing these wacky experiments during jobs. Hitomi's the only character that gets any kind of character development throughout this show. they refuse to focus on the other two girls. And honestly, Rui is just used as a kind of ex machina. Here I am. I'm here to save the day, basically. I thought this through beforehand, or I knew that you were going to go behind my back and do whatever. So they never really get the chance to shine, and it makes the other two sisters just seem like side characters to the Hitomi show, which is what this honestly ends up being. It ends up being the Hitomi show. I don't feel like we get enough time with the other characters. I don't feel like we get enough time with any characters, to be honest. They have this French burglar guy that they hang out with, and like he shows up in a couple episodes. I couldn't tell you what his name is. Once again, I am honestly, the real problem with this show is that it is not so bad that you're going to like lose your mind watching it, and it's also not so good that you're going to be engaged with the narrative enough to want to get through it constantly. It felt like a real slog after a certain point, but it never felt bad enough that I wanted to truly drop it, right? So that's where today's discussion kind of comes from, because I watched all 12 episodes of this show. I was kind of iffy by episode 3, and then I decided to stick it out. And at that point, I found out that these were weekly releases, and I went, oh, the full season isn't even out, so I couldn't binge this if I wanted to. So I had to wait week to week to find out what was happening. And honestly, I think that hurt it a lot more than it helped it. One of the reasons that I say that this would be a better, fully dropped season is the cliffhangers are not strong enough for me to even remember them week to week. I would have to think back, and honestly, you don't even have to do that, because they pretty much replay the end of the previous episode at the start of the next episode, right? So what's the point of this week-long break if you're just going to remind me in just a quick second at the beginning, hey, this is what happened last time, in case you were, in case you got lost or anything, or we completely start, somewhere else in the timeline, somewhere after, weeks after almost, of something happening. It's just not very strong narratively throughout the show. I never felt super engaged with any of the things that were happening. I even felt that some of the things that came in and came to play a part were just out of place and weird. There was a car chase at one point that just felt like I was watching a completely different anime. This thing is very restrained. It's by LidenFilms, by the way, who I love. And watching this, like, visually, it's just painful. It's really painful to watch because there's just nothing special about it. It's very bland. It feels almost routine. It feels like there was no heart put into this. That's another real problem with this show, is it feels kind of soulless. Down to the voice acting, down to the animation. It just feels like this was put together because, oh, we have a contract with Disney. They want us to animate Cat's Eye. We're going to do that now. And nothing seems like it has any enthusiasm behind it. Nothing feels like the animator or the voice actor or really anyone wanted to be there. The soundtrack is good in places. And you may be thinking to yourself, who gives a fuck about the soundtrack? And frankly, yeah, I usually don't notice the soundtrack, but when everything else is just so bland and boring, that's the real crime of this show. The real crime of this show is I thought it could be kind of interesting. I like the idea of this like burglar troupe robbing these places for their own, motivations, but it never goes anywhere. They never do anything interesting with it. And at the points where they almost do something interesting, they pull themselves back. Spoiler alert for Cat's Eye, if you're curious. I'm going to get into some spoiler territory now. There are a couple points where it seems like the detective is about to find out their identity, but the plot always has some way that we cannot let that happen. There's always something, oh, he closes his eyes now. He closed his eyes at a pivotal moment towards the end of the season when it would have revealed Hitomi's identity to him. And they decide that he's just, oh, I'm going to close my eyes now, even though I've been hunting this group for the entire season. And the way that they make it sound, he's been hunting them for years. But now he's just he's gonna close his eyes, and he's gonna, as a thank you for helping spare his life a couple seconds ago. Alternatively, there's this scene where they're in a hole, Hitomi and this detective, and the detective can't see because his eyes aren't good enough, but Hitomi can see because, frankly, fuck you. That's why Hitomi can see. Hitomi can see in the dark. Oh, they're Cat's Eye. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. They never express having any kind of supernatural abilities in this show. They never express any kind of possible magic side to this show. It's a very restrained, very locked to reality kind of show. And I think that works to its detriment whenever you're telling me Hitomi can see in pitch darkness, But our detective character, he can't see now because story-wise, it would reveal her identity to him, and he would know that she's in Cat's Eye. Which is, we're already towing a stupid line because the girls run a cafe during the day that has the same name as their robbery group, right? The detectives hunting Cat's Eye, the girls run Cat's Eye Cafe. I don't know. There's some almost interesting ideas they play around with. I get a kind of a cool episode. I know I say that she doesn't get any episodes to shine. She gets one episode where she really gets to shine, and that's where she tricks this detective partner of the other detectives that Rui is on FaceTime with them, and she's actually using some kind of weird green screen technology to make herself look like Rui and be Rui and imitate her voice, etc., etc. And I get to shine in that episode and then never get to do anything like that ever again. That was Ai's episode for this 12-season anime. It was the only time she got to shine. She had a romantic interest at one point that I think was around for a episode and then never shows up a fucking again. I'm telling you, this show's just bad. This show is just, it's bad. It's mid. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but that's the problem though. It's not so inoffensively bad that I'm like, that I would stop watching it. I made it through 12 episodes of this show. After a certain point, that's the other problem with like, when do I drop a show? If I get 8, 9 episodes deep, there's 12 episodes in the season. Why the fuck am I going to drop it now? Why am I going to drop it at this point where I've already dedicated so much time to watching these 20-minute episodes? So, yeah, the show, do I recommend Cat's Eye? No, fuck no. I think it's a waste of time. I think it was an exercise, and it feels like LidenFilms just wanted to, I don't know, hone their skills. Because once again, visually, there's just nothing interesting going on here. It has this very restrained look, which works in a show like Cowboy Bebop or Samurai Champloo. But that's because Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo have interesting things happening on the screen. I never feel like this anime has anything interesting happening on the screen, and so this kind of dull, realistic animation is very boring. It's very boring to watch. It doesn't excite me in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not sitting here, like a zoomer saying jingle keys in front of me, like show me flashing lights. I just want anything visually interesting to happen. If I had to compliment the art style of this show, I would say the landscapes look really pretty at certain points. And that's a terrible fucking thing. If I'm looking for something visually interesting in your show, and my mind is going, those backgrounds were pretty at some points. Those backgrounds were enjoyable to look at sometimes. That's a real problem. That's a real problem for your show. If I'm so uninvested in the story and there's nothing visually pleasing going on the screen to the point that I'm looking at the backdrops like, oh yeah, that was drawn pretty nicely. Yeah, that looks pretty sick. These are some pretty cool, that water. I like the effects that they used on that water. These are not good things for me to be noticing in your show, especially when it's about a group of thieving women who are trying to evade law enforcement constantly. That sounds so interesting on paper. It sounds like I get to watch Heist every other episode. I get to watch them set up their heist or scope places out. But we don't do any of that. We don't see any of the real planning. They just kind of do things, and it just kind of works out for them every episode because they're so goated, because they're so good at this, because they're so incredible. And it just lacks any real interest. It lacks anything that is really engaging, once again. We do the same thing every episode for the 12 episodes, with it only really kind of reaching a narrative head towards the final 2 episodes of the anime. This is the Blood Sea problem. This is the problem I have with Blood Sea. Narratively, nothing happened in Blood Sea until episodes 11 and 12. Narratively, nothing really happens until 11 and 12 of Cat's Eye. The most interesting thing that happens is the detective gets caught in the hole with Hitomi at one point. But outside of that, there's nothing super interesting here, except for the weird as fuck car chase that happens in like episode 7 or 8, I think. So, honestly, the show is just forgettable. It's forgettable. I'm forgetting about it as I'm talking about it, frankly. It's not so bad that I can say it's a terrible show. I know I may have said that earlier, but it's not a terrible show. It's not terrible. It's just mid. And that is a crime worse than being bad, I think. When your show is just so middle of the ground, so average, that I can't form a definite opinion on it because it doesn't lean too far in either direction, that's a bad thing. That means you played it safe. That means you didn't do anything interesting, but you did just enough to get by. It's like getting a C. This is like getting a C for me. I'm giving you a C. It's not a good grade. It's not a bad grade. You're just average, right? You didn't do anything special, and that's worse than being bad in my opinion. At least I remember Blood C. At least Blood C has stuck in my memory because of how bad it was in the 11th and 12th episode. But Cat's Eye, it only really sticks in my memory because I finished it recently, right? And that's not great. That's not my favorite thing in the world. So that's how I feel about Cat's Eye. We're going to get more into when should you drop a show in the next portion of this. So look forward to that. Cat's Eye, just not good, man. This was not fire. I did not enjoy this. I would have liked anything else here, honestly. This episode of Anime Sub is brought to you in part by At the Movies with Ty, Tim, and Matt. Did you know I'm on another podcast where I discuss movies in depth with my friends? You should definitely check it out. If you enjoy listening to me talk about anime, you'll enjoy listening to us talk about various movies. All right, that's my sponsored segment. It's a show I'm on. I'm not getting paid to do this, but fuck it. Anyways, I wanted to talk about when do we drop an anime, right? Obviously, I'm talking about Cat's Eye today. I did not drop this when I likely should have. I think for me, usually the limitation is if I'm not interested within 3 episodes, I'll drop a show. I've had a myriad of shows I've done that too. I talked about Hellgirl on this podcast before. That was a show that I watched 3 episodes of, said, this isn't for me. And sometimes shows are so bad, I can drop them within 2. But I usually try to make myself make it to the 3-point mark and then decide to stop watching the show from there. Unless things are actually so bad that I have to throw myself out of it automatically. One show that I can think of was, Attack on Titan I dropped automatically. I didn't think it was super interesting. I thought it was a little silly. A little too silly for my taste, you know? So I dropped Attack on Titan pretty quickly. Hellgirl, talked about it before. Also dropped that. I dropped the second show of Hellgirl as well because it was just more of what Hellgirl was, and I was hoping for some kind of improvement, but alas, there was not one. I dropped, I think I've talked about it before, but my encounter, or no, fuck these titles. Cultural Exchange with a Game Center Girl. That I dropped after 3 episodes, and that's only because, not because the quality of the show dipped or anything, but I just figured out that we were dealing with a minor, and it made me incredibly uncomfortable, and I decided to stop watching it. So I stopped watching things for a myriad of different reasons. It's usually because the show either shows something that I don't typically enjoy, or I haven't been super engaged with the show up to this point. Another one that I dropped, and I think I talked about last episode, or maybe I talked about it on At the Movies with Ty, Tim, and Matt, which you should check out, is you can't be in a rom-com with your childhood best friends. I dropped that one in 2 episodes just because I got the joke. I got the joke, and I realized that the entire show was just going to be that joke the entire time. And that was not the kind of romance that I was looking for at the time. One Dance, I dropped in 1 episode just because the dance CGI looked so fucking bad. I could not believe my eyes. Yeah, I am someone who, I try not to drop things, usually. If they're just so unappealing to me that I see no reason to continue with them, I will, that is when I will drop a show. When I just have absolutely no appeal, there's nothing redeeming, and there's nothing keeping me here. But that was the problem with Cat's Eye. You know, Cat's Eye, it didn't do anything that was offensive enough for me to want to drop it, but that also resulted in me just consuming mid, you know? There was nothing super interesting going on. There was nothing that really pulled me in or made me want to experience this more. But I kept coming back week to week because it was just, I was watching it. It was something to kill time. I could have been watching something better. Yeah, but I didn't have anything set in my sights at the time. A future episode, we're going to talk about Chunibyo. And that show, I loved. I loved from start to finish. I've only watched the first season, mind you. Loved it from start to finish. Had a great time with it. And it had so much keeping me there, right? And Hellgirl had so little that it pushed me away. And now we're at Cat's Eye, where I managed to make it through 12 episodes. And it's kind of a mystery to me because there would be some funny jokes here and there, and that's about it. You know, the characters never really compelled me to stick around, particularly even though I wanted Ai to get more screen time. I wanted Ai to do more stuff. but it was the Hitomi show. It's a trio show that's about one person. One person gets character development over the course of the season, and the other two take a back seat to her the entire time. I should have dropped it probably around episode 6. I probably should have dropped it around then, but I was just killing time with it. I didn't feel like I needed to stop watching it because, again, it doesn't do anything. It's just a nothing burger of a show. I asked my Discord, when do you stop watching? Or when do you decide it's time to drop a series? Smiley said they never intentionally drop a series. Sometimes I just forget to keep watching, and straight up same. I also do that as well. I mean, I drop series intentionally, but sometimes I do forget to just go back to a show. I'll forget I was watching a show, and then I'll forget to go back to it. Hammy, on the other hand, contributed without extenuating circumstances 6 episodes. So 6 episodes is their standard, and they follow up with, if it doesn't grab my attention by then it's over. I also do 3 episodes if it loses my attention partway through, just to give it a chance. Okay, that's fair. I also abide by the 3-episode rule, but it also depends on how long the anime is. Sometimes for a longer anime, I'll allot more episodes because there is potential for change from season to season, and who knows, maybe halfway through the season the show gets better, right? That was, I think, my cope with Cat's Eye. I think I just kept hoping that it was going to get better each week, and then each week they just gave me the same thing over and over again. I know the season's usually, the season's done when they start distributing it like this, but I can hope. There have been shows, in my opinion, that have just gotten better as they've gone on. JoJo's is a great example of that, and I love the first part of JoJo's, mind you. I love the first part of JoJo's, but I can see why people consider it, different from how the rest of the show is, because the first part of JoJo's and even the second part are not the same as the third, fourth, and now the 5th part, right? I'm not all the way through JoJo's, mind you. I'm talking about JoJo's here. I have not made it through part 5 yet. I'm still working my way through part 5. I'm enjoying part 5. I'm enjoying part 5 a lot more than I was enjoying part 4. But yeah, I also think another show that I probably could have dropped halfway through was Hell's Paradise. But again, I hoped that it was going to get better. And it never did. It never did get better. It was just... It did not commit the crime of just being mid. I actually think Hell's Paradise suffers a lot narratively, and I think that it's not that good of a show. Am I going to check out season 2? Again, I don't know. I think I've said this in previous episodes, but I'm not sure. There was some part of me that wanted the show to get better, and I hoped that maybe the show would get better, and the show never got better, which I can't chalk that up to being my fault. I didn't have a good instinct here, I guess. I wish Cat's Eye was a better show. I really do. I wish that it did more with its concept, and I wish that it was a more interesting show. But it's not. And that brings us to the end of today's anime sub. What did you think of Cat's Eye? Did you enjoy it? When do you drop an anime? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll be sure to retort in our next episode. So, thank you so much for listening to Anime Sub. I will see you all next time. Until then, I will see you when I see you. Bye, everybody.